This episode of Escaping Rock Bottom is sponsored by Sabino Recovery. As an ambassador of Sabino Recovery, I have seen firsthand how they transform lives in a compassionate and loving environment. Sabino Recovery is a residential treatment program that addresses trauma, substance use, mental health, and maladaptive coping mechanisms. They offer one-on-one counseling, EMDR therapy, equine therapy, yoga, and so much more. If you would like to learn more about Sabino Recovery, please visit sabinorecovery.com or contact the number provided in the description of this podcast. Hi everyone, it's Brandon Lee. I'm down here on the campus of Sabino Recovery. Really excited to have this podcast because this is what it's all about. It's one of the reasons why I joined the team down here at Sabino Recovery, and you're going to meet the CEO, the brainchild of this treatment center. And it really is state of the art. No treatment centers are ever created equally. And I love Sabino Recovery because they believe in neuroplasticity and they believe in the advancements of science to help folks out there who are struggling with mental health. Thomas is joining us on the podcast today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Happy to do it.
Yeah, we'll get to the part of you actually creating a treatment center that is so different from the other treatment centers that are out there, and the science behind this and the neuroplasticity, because you do have an incredible team here. I mean, you guys do equine therapy, you do EMDR light therapy, you do brain mapping. I'm going to get into all of that and why you created that. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Dallas, Texas, and moved to Wichita Falls, Texas when I was like 4. I have an older brother, older sister. We're all really close in age. Have a great family, grew up with very loving, supporting parents, cousins, grandparents. I mean, it's, kind of when you look at my full story, a lot of people, can say like it all starts with childhood trauma, and like, that's not my story. Was it perfect? No, none of them are. But I had a great childhood. In fact, I was a really good kid. I was really good at sports. I was popular. Everything went pretty well, all the way until, junior high.
So outside looking in, little Thomas as a kid kind of had the perfect life, the perfect childhood.
Perfect, maybe not perfect, but probably pretty dang close.
All right. So, for me, I started to get into trouble when I was about 14, 15 years old. That's kind of when the people pleaser went to the side and I started to kind of get into some trouble because my story, I did have childhood trauma. So to already kind of act out at age 15, very normal when, a child suffers early childhood traumatic trauma. What about you? When did life start to kind of go off the rails for you?
Probably like 8th grade. I remember just my best friend, and it started with tobacco, and it was like, hey, here's some dip, and it's like, let's sneak back into the alley and dip and, get all buzzed off dip and then, hide it. And we'd have one can that would last a month. And that turned into, let's try a cigarette. And then, freshman year of high school, I remember in November, some odd reason, like I had a fake ID. One of the, golf pros at the country club, and he was like 23, and he was like, you kind of look like me here. And I look like I was 10.
You still kind of look young.
Yeah. It wasn't like, wow, this guy's...
You'd still get carded at the gas station.
I do, even for like lottery tickets. And so my brother randomly called me and just said, hey, do you think you can buy some beer? I was like, yeah. And so he was a senior when I was a freshman. And he's like, well, if you can buy some beer, I'll take you out. And I was like, okay. So we did. And I go to this store, little old Wichita Falls, and like the guy sells it to me. I'm just like, oh my God, this works. And we went out, and that night was like, I remember it vividly. I drank like 16 beers, and it was like this is what I've been looking for. It's
so funny that you remember that so vividly, because I too was in the 8th grade, was the first time I had my first cigarette, and I was in the far right field of the baseball, the baseball field at the junior high school. And I remember taking that first hit of a Marlboro Red because, I didn't start off with like the lights. Like I just dumped right into the Reds.
Oh yeah.
And I remember physically that buzz, that like takeover of the body. And I just remember okay, that felt great. I want another round.
Yeah. And I also remember, so I mean, I had spent the night with one of my friends and like I threw up all night long. I mean, like all over his house. Most people would go, wow, that was a bad experience. And the first words out of my mouth the next morning were, let's do that again. Like there was no negative aspect of it. My parents were not down with that. They were not the kind of parents that are like, yeah, have a party at our house. I mean, they were very strict, like no drinking. And the thought of like getting in trouble, did nothing to try and keep me from how can we do this again very quickly.
Okay, so those are kind of your teenage years. You did go to college.
I did.
What was college like for Thomas?
So, definitely got in a lot of trouble in high school. It's grounded a lot, and even like wrecked my dad's truck. So that meant no more drinking, and I just immediately started smoking weed. Like I in my mind, I went, he didn't say I couldn't smoke weed. I agreed to not drinking.
Such the manipulator already.
Exactly. So then when I got to college, went to the University of Texas in Austin. And, I like to tell people, like, if I was an SAE, in a fraternity, I partied a lot. I did not do well in school. I took a lot of electives. And if you looked at like lined up all of the SAEs and said, which ones are the alcoholics, you'd go, all of them. Like all of them were. The difference in them and me is like they had things that came up, like when they had to study or like kind of do grown up things, like they would turn it off. I couldn't. I'd have a big test and find myself at 3 a.m, hopped up on Adderall, smoking weed, playing Grand Theft Auto, going, I should stop. I should stop, And so then my junior year in college, I actually got kicked out of the University of Texas. I got suspended one semester, went home, was a bank teller, which was kind of awesome. I loved being a teller. And then went back and did almost nothing and this is kind of where my trauma came in and a lot of like Sabino Recovery, creation and why it means so much to me, as well as I came home for Christmas, had the worst Christmas ever. Got a letter from the University of Texas saying, please don't come back. And I got it in the mail. So I had to hide that. And it's just kind of like, how am I going to figure this out? And then that night we had all these friends coming in town to do this big DEB presentation, which is kind of a weird thing we do in Texas, like present, people to society as if they're like grown-ups and successful.
This is very Texas.
It's very Texas. So that night I like went out and I rolled my car with like 5 people in it. And I mean, like you just call someone to help you roll it back over and you drive the thing home, and I just parked it like around.
It's a very Southern thing to do.
Very Southern. Thought I'll just figure this out tomorrow. Then that night, had our big DEB presentation, and all my friends, we kind of decided we were going to go out to this friend's ranch and, take like a Hummer limo, be very responsible. So we didn't drink and drive. And kind of long story short, at, the wee hours of the morning, we and one of my best friends and another good family friend, were out I don't even really remember what we were doing other than just drinking and drugs and definitely not sober. And I watched one of my best friends fall off this cliff into a river. And turned around to the other guy and said, hey, he just fell off. Like he just kind of stumbled off. And I literally like watched him fall to his death and jumped off and tried to say, I'm still in a tuxedo. It was, the middle of December. It was cold. And then the other guy left to go get help and like left me there in the pitch black for, it seemed like hours. And, I remember, I think my parents got a phone call. They were like, hey, Thomas and, Scotty both went off this cliff. Like, one of them died, so they had like a 30-minute drive knowing like we got a 50-50 chance here. And I just like chalked that up as like, that was a bad night. I did maybe a little bit of therapy around it, but not a lot. Kind of started going to AA, enjoyed just being able to talk, and then went on a Knowles course because I really couldn't go back to UT, which kind of worked out for me because I couldn't go anyways. Then I went to the University of Arkansas and just got right back into it. The drinking and the drugging showed up pretty quick. And then actually I haven't graduated. I faked my college graduation. Like I knew I wasn't going to graduate. I'd been working with the dean. He had said I could graduate if I finished this Spanish class. I didn't even go to the first one. He called me and was very upset. I didn't know he was literally like checking with the teacher. And he was like, you're done. You're out of here. But like grandma, parents, everybody was already coming. Like, what do you do? So
what did you do?
I had another friend that had like a cap and gown that I kind of talked into, like, after you walk through the line, I'm going to need that. And then I found out who like calls out people's names, which was a teacher's assistant for one of my English classes, and was like, hey, I think I'd pay her like $300. And it was like, when you get to the eyes, I'm going to need you to add Thomas Isbell. Like, I had torn my ACL, I'm on crutches, and like just got in. And I remember her looking at me like, I'm going to get in so much trouble. Thomas Isbell. And I like walk, across the stage, shaking all their hands. And the dean was the very last one. And I mean, he just had this look and he shook my hand and he goes, what the hell? And I just went, it's too late, sir. Just go with it. And walked off. Everybody's up there clapping. And I hadn't figured out where to sit, but I was in like a cast. So I just, gave my parents the old rounded up signal and crutched out the back, and they're like, why didn't we? Like, oh, we've been to tons of graduations. Like, my knee hurts. Come on, let's go get lunch. And packed my stuff and called a friend, had an opportunity in Austin and moved to Austin, and I said, I graduated,
So did you ever officially graduate? No,
I lack one Spanish class from graduating.
Okay, so I just got to ask you, what's holding you back from just going to take that one credit? Or is it just like a story now that you get to tell?
I mean, the only reason I would do it at this point would be probably for my parents. Like, Dad spent some
I got to ask you this. Have you come clean to your parents, or are they going to listen to this podcast for the first time and be like, Thomas, did you really not graduate?
No, they know.
They know now. Is it like a funny story in the family now?
I think we're getting to where they laugh at it. You kind of have to ask them. I mean, they care more about the fact that I graduated from treatment than college. They are very proud of just like, where I am now and what I'm doing, that I don't think if you ask them, how do you feel about Thomas? They'd go, he's doing so great, but we're still pissed off about college.
We just really wish Thomas would finish that credit of Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get through college.
Ish.
Managed to manipulate your way out of college, which, by the way, it's A+ addiction. Qualities right there. Being able to navigate your way to get a degree. So where did life go off the rails to a point where you looked at yourself in the mirror and you finally hit your rock bottom and said, you know what? You need to clean up your life. Like, you need to make a change.
So I was, after college, went to Austin, lived with a really close friend of mine, and the partying just kind of went up a notch. We in all aspects, and it's like it was always there. It was like I always knew, but also like one of my big things was Adderall. I mean, I took a lot of Adderall, and that was always I'd have these moments of sobriety, like the drinking's getting out of control, but would just keep with the Adderall and then smoking weed. I just would alternate, of like what's less destructive.
Right. Uppers and downers.
Yes.
Yeah.
But was trying. Was trying to be good, was
right.
trying to kind of get my stuff together and couldn't. And ended up going and getting an opportunity to go do some sales kind of / motivational speaking for this company up in Ohio. And I kind of took the leap, said I need to, relocate. Every alcoholic's attempt of, if I move from here to here,
all my problems go
solved.
away.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm going to take myself with me, which is the problem. So go up to Ohio, lived in this place called Painesville, which adequately named. It was one of the most painful years of my life. Like, I lived in my office. Like, this is my office. It would be like if we had a couch and like I lived here. And so the commute wasn't bad though. And I had no friends. It was very isolating. And kind of long story short, had done a couple of these presentations. Like, we would sell this, training program to mainly like the green industry, so landscaping and that kind of stuff, and did a couple of them like where the drugs worked for me. I had just enough, snorted just enough Adderall, smoked enough weed that like I was good. I was funny. So I had this really big event in Dallas, Texas, and it's at the Dallas Country Club, and there were all these, country club managers coming. We had kind of figured out it worked really well in country clubs. And I mean, this is like 10 in the morning, and I'm out in the parking lot, and was so nervous. So I'm snorting Adderall, to get funny, to get ready. And then was like, too much Adderall. Okay, so like get some scotch, drink some scotch, cool me down a little bit. A little too much scotch. Well, that cycle just happened real quick. From need more Adderall to need more weed to need more scotch to, oh crap, I'm messed up. And I walk in, and like the first person that I see is Ernie, who was the country club manager at the Wichita Falls Country Club that I've known my entire life. And he's like, and it was just, I just remember thinking, oh crap, I'm caught. Like he knows me, I'm caught. And I had this big whiteboard, and I walked up to it and just like started tapping on it and just went, run. And I just like set the marker down, turned around, and just walked out. And called my boss and said I quit. And he said, great, I just heard what happened. I was about to fire you. You just saved me some severance. Click. Drove home thinking, daddy would save me and just give me some hotshot job for doing nothing. And he very quickly said, let's go up to my office. And he just said, hey, I don't care where you go and I don't care what you do, but you can't live at my house. That's not your room. It's not your house. I'm not giving you a job. I'm not helping you get a job. I love you, but you need to go. And I was homeless for like a month and a half. Now I had a Tahoe, so I was doing pretty good for a homeless guy. But just kind of bounced around from like friends' couches. I thought I was bipolar, wanted to be bipolar. Like no one's begged to be bipolar as much as me because they have a pill for that. I was good at taking pills. So it's like, that's what it is going to be. Got these tests back. You're not bipolar. And I just had this moment of like crushing defeat, and was back in Wichita Falls because I got to go to a friend's wedding, and was sitting upstairs out of nowhere and had this moment where like I saw this Bible on the table, and I went over and grabbed it and just started reading it. And I don't remember what I read, but the next thing I know, I was on the ground and I was just like, God, today's the day. Like I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to get better, but I can't do this. Like I'm done. And like, dude, I hear like Thomas. And so I very clearly said, I'll do whatever you tell me to do, but you have to tell me what to do. And if you're real, like you need to show up, please. And I hear, Thomas, you're an alcoholic and I want you to go to treatment. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, okay. And I said, I remember going, I'm a coward. I don't know how to do that. Like, please get me there. Go to the wedding that night, double fisting champagne bottles, but I had the intention of being a good boy. That didn't last, went straight to the bar. And my old friend, David, who had helped me get sober back when my friend died, I happened to walk in, and his son had gone to this treatment center 6 months prior that I happened to be talking to because he was making me a pair of boots, and just remember like I'd known him my whole life. And like all of a sudden he was different, and just being like, what's going on with you? Like you seem peaceful. And he just shared his experience of getting sober. So then his dad walked in, and I just walked up and said, hey, you got to take me where you took your son, and we got to go tomorrow. And the next day I was on my way to treatment.
What was treatment like for you when you first did it? Because is relapse part of your story, or when you went to treatment, you've been sober since?
No, right before the last thing I said to my parents, I walked in and I just said, as I was walking down the hall, they were arguing. And I heard my dad say, I don't care what he was mad at me, says, I'm not giving him a job. And my mom was crying, and she goes, like, be patient. Maybe he's finally ready to go to treatment. And like, I didn't know my mom even knew what treatment was or had ever even had that thought. And I was kind of mad at my, just parents. It's still their fault in my mind. And I was like, you're wrong, but you're right. I was like, I'm not asking you to pay for it. I'll figure it out. I just want you to know I'm going to be slightly unavailable for the next 30 days. And got to treatment, took so much Adderall, my blood pressure was like 220 over 190 when I checked in. Everybody started freaking. I mean, I just remember shots and this and, then I kind of, what was that? They're like, well, that's Valium. And I was like, I love Valium. I'm going to love this place. I'm going to fit right in. And came to out of detox, had all this hospital garbage on, just like no idea where I was. Go outside and there's this girl sitting there, and I had like I found my pants and had one cigarette. It was like one of the most true things I've ever said. I remember looking at her, and it's like she read my mind, because I was trying to figure out where the hell am I? And she goes, you're in a treatment center for, and I hadn't even talked to her. She goes, you're at a treatment center for drugs and alcohol, and I saw you when you got here. You need to be here. And I just looked at it and I said, well, I've finally done it. I said, I have finally burned every bridge in my life. The only thing I have left is this one cigarette. And she whips out her pack and she hands me a cigarette and she goes, well, now you have two. You're on the up and up. And like, that was so true. From that moment, my life stopped going this way and started going this way. But I was like, I got an A+ in treatment. Like, I was in the front row, like.
You were?
Yes.
Gosh, because when I first got sober, I never went to treatment. I should have. Looking back, I should have, because I had 2 overdoses in 2 weeks, was hospitalized in a coma, right?
Yeah.
It was just a little nurse who showed me some grace that day, and she gave me $10. She said, go to this meeting. Went to that meeting, and it was an AA meeting. Had no idea what even AA was at that time. I just went. There was like 100 people in this room, and it was really weird. But similar kind of an awakening when I said, I don't even know what I'm up here saying. I just know that if I don't stop what I'm doing, I'm gonna die. And then after that meeting, a bunch of people come up and they're like, welcome to your new life kind of situation. It was that realization. And I also want people to know that if you relapse, it's okay. Like, it's okay. Like, nobody expects anybody in life to be perfect at anything. And before we got into treatment, or before we got sober, we definitely weren't perfect. But also, you don't have to relapse. And relapse doesn't always have to be part of your story. So you decide, you have this revelation, you decide, okay, like, life is on the up and up, and your trajectory started to go up. What inspired you to create a treatment center and have this place truly be part of who you are as a person?
I mean, honestly, I can say my journey has kind of come step by step, piece by piece, without any forethought. It just keeps happening. Like, that's my recovery story and journey, is like, I just was dedicated to, I'm done with this drinking stuff. Like, I know what Thomas is capable of leading Thomas's life. I'm done. I don't want to die. And just by like showing up every day, I mean, like, I lived in a sober living house for a year after treatment. Like, I quit all life. I just said, I'm doing this. If I don't do this, I'm screwed. And the other cool stuff just keeps happening to me. Like, right at a year, I had a friend of mine who's a country singer in Texas call me and say, hey, basically be in my kitchen tomorrow morning. No idea why. Hadn't talked to him in forever. He's a big country singer. I show up in his kitchen and he's like, grab your stuff. Let's go play golf. We go up to this big boardroom and he's like, everybody meet my new tournament director, Thomas Isbell. And I was like, tournament for what? Honestly, I thought ping pong. I'm good at ping pong. And I thought he found out that, like, the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows I'm good at ping pong. And he was like, you and I are going to throw a big golf tournament at Pebble Beach and raise a bunch of money and then give it away. And I remember going, I have no idea how to do that. He's a big old guy. And he just looked at me and he goes, well, you're going to figure it out. And like, that's exactly what I needed. Cause I mean, again, didn't even graduate from college. I wasn't good at like studying and like doing stuff. I was not a productive human being. But he helped me. Like, that's the next step of what I needed. One, like, I needed someone to have confidence in me, and he did. And we were successful, and we were able to. And we started a nonprofit, and we would give money to the Ben Hogan Foundation and the Gladney Center for Adoption. And like, I loved that. I loved being able to help people. But like, I wasn't adopted. I couldn't connect to that. And so, kind of through that, one day we were actually playing Pebble Beach. I'll never forget walking down the 6th fairway, and he put his big arm around me and he goes, hey, you and I both know, like, you need to move on. Not like you're not doing a good job. Not like I'm ready for you to go. He was like, you need to be helping alcoholics. And I had also, while I was in Fort Worth living there, my trauma stuff came up. I'd never dealt with it. And started to, this close to a relapse, which is, for me, like, a relapse is death. and had a sponsor come show up and just basically say, hey, like, you need to go see a psychiatrist. This is not okay. You're not a doctor. You don't get to make doctor decisions for yourself. And I was like, okay, found a great therapist, processed all of that PTSD, did the EMD, all the stuff I didn't know anything about, learned about this thing called codependency, like got healthy from that. And so anyways, just had an opportunity to come here. It wasn't my idea. I didn't have this like, I want to start a treatment center in Tucson, Arizona that, combines trauma and addictions and treats them at the same time. It was my story. It's how I get to be who I am. But the only thing I knew about treatment was how to go to one. And so I had a friend kind of say, hey, here's my idea. I've been thinking about this thing out in Tucson. Sounds like you want to help alcoholics. Like, we need some money. And I was like, I know a lot of rich people. Like, I can do that.
You're like, I'm from Texas.
Yeah. Well, and all I do is
there.
raise money and ask people for big chunks of money and tell them you're never going to get it back. You can just write it off. Now I can tell them you might actually get this back someday. And it just, it's like God just kind of kept connecting the dots for me.
Well, I think one of the beautiful things, too, is that you were able to build this treatment center, Sabino Recovery, in beautiful Tucson, Arizona, right on the base of Sabino Canyon, because you have your experience. This isn't somebody just stepping into a field or an industry where you don't have your own personal experience to understand what your residents, the people you're trying to help, are going through. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the unique things that you have to offer, right? Is that you can look somebody who's struggling and you can look them right in the eye and say, I understand. Like, I get your pain, and give me 15 minutes. And I'll tell you why I get it. Yeah. And we have the ability, right, to look another addict who's struggling in the eyes and say, I've been where you're at. This is how I got better. But what I think, I was a product of 12-step rooms. AA was my thing. I never went to treatment. I did 5-6 meetings a week for 8 years straight. Okay. Yeah. But eventually I hit a wall because I wasn't growing anymore. And I always believe that my higher power always leads me to where I need to be, because I've always said, like, I have a great platform and I believe so passionately about what recovery has done for me in my life. And I want to be able to give that gift to other people. But it wasn't until recently where I really started to work with a trained trauma therapist with EMDR light therapy, a trained trauma therapist who was able to go back to my early childhood trauma and start to unpack those things in ways that regular treatment centers will never be able to do for you, in ways that just going to a 12-step recovery meeting will never be able to get there. Because you and I both know, I've been in meetings where you've seen somebody with 30 plus years of sobriety and you look at them and their life is a mess.
If that's what I'm going to get, I'm out of here.
I'm out of here. And eventually when I had 8 years sober, guys 30, 35 years were asking me to sponsor them. I'm like, whoa, something is not right here, because you should be sponsoring me with 35 years. Not a guy with 8 years should be sponsoring you. And my question to them was, why? Like, why are you coming to me? And their answers were, well, I want what you have. And I'm like, then I need to go somewhere else, because how is that possible? And what I think is so fascinating here is that you do believe in the advancements of science.
Absolutely.
And neuroplasticity. New age medicine, new age science, the advancements of that to help with the rewiring here. And I think that's one thing that I've struggled with some of the 12-step rooms, is that they haven't caught up to science, and they still don't believe that science exists and tapping into that science. So I want to talk to you about the different types of sciences that you guys provide here. And, even the basic belief that we have the capability to rewire our brains.
So, first off, it sounds kind of light and hokey, but it's not. Like, what we do best, what I'm the most proud of our staff of, is like when someone first comes here, like the first couple of days, like, we just love them. Like, you can't work on your trauma if you don't trust us to be open and honest. Like, we can't help you with something that you won't tell us about. And it just sets the theme for their treatment of these people care. And that comes from what you're talking about. They care because they've been there and someone showed them that kindness. Like, no one's been I mean, at a lot of other treatment centers, it's like, here's what you're going to do. They're kind of there for a job. And, you know, to get through what we have to go through and people that come here, what they have to go through, like, you have to have a connection with the person that's trying to help you, and it has to come from wow, this person's here to help me, not here to work from 1 to 2 to get his hourly rate to move on to something else. And like, that just comes across. You can't script that. You can't put that in a program. You can't, like, that's just the people. Like, the biggest part of my job is focused on hiring the right people. And so there's really not an answer to how I get them other than you just connect with them. I've gotten to where it's pretty obvious. And that's the feedback I get from our residents more than anything of this is what I hear more than anything. How did you find so many amazing people to work at the same place?
I mean, that kind of says it all. I mean, that really does says it all, because you do have this team that brings so many different skill sets that can really help so many different kinds of people who are suffering from different mental health issues. I want to talk one more time again about, the science behind Sabino Recovery, because not every treatment center has brain mapping. Not every treatment center has equine therapy or bilateral stimulation or, the different types of light therapy. And tell me how that really helps somebody who's coming in here with many kind of disorders or many kind of mental health issues.
So it helps from the standpoint of, again, treating the person, not the diagnosis, not what they're coming in here with, but the person. And so the first week and a half, like, we're just kind of throwing a bunch of different modalities at you. And I don't know what's going to work for you. I don't. But my team is paying attention and they're collaborating. I mean, that we are such a collaborative approach. Our neurotherapist, clinical director, therapist, clinical team, medical director, like, our emails talking about people all day, every day. Hey, I was just in a session with so-and-so doing, brain mapping. Here's what I found. Well, that might affect the medication that the, medical director wants to give based on, like, the brain. You can see, like, that's real, that's science, that's not theoretical, that's like a real thing. And then based on the therapies that are happening, or, maybe some testing that we've been given, and that's shared with the neurotherapist, and she's going, well, maybe that's why this, this, and again, now we're talking neurotherapy and we're getting close to but this is why the alpha's this way and the theta's over here. And maybe none of that's really resonating with them. And they go out and Shara has an equine session with them, or an equine EMDR session, which is just awesome. And comes back and goes, man, I just broke through from this. This just happened. That shared information in a collaborative approach is what allows us to go, each person also being empathetic and very compassionate, but very skilled at what they do. Okay, now I'm going to try this. Now I can talk to so-and-so about this. But even that, if you want to talk to someone that opened up in something in equine therapy, they're only going to tell you if you've established that connection and that relationship with them. That's why that's the heart of everything that we do. If you haven't done that, it doesn't matter what your specialty is. It's not going to resonate with them.
We talk so much about the stigma around mental health and trying to smash that stigma and end that stigma, because until we do, so many people are going to just suffer in shame and suffer in silence, right? Because it's like a scarlet letter that still exists in this world when somebody says, I'm depressed, right? They're afraid to tell their boss, I'm depressed, because then suddenly the boss is going to look at them as if they're weak. They can't get their job done. They're not reliable, right? So we still live in this society where we have this fear of telling somebody, I'm struggling, because in our society, it's looked at as weak. How do we end? How do we break that stigma around mental health?
I mean, that, for one, where we get our information, how we get our information is going to have to help and get on the same page. Go Google symptoms of depression and pick one of the 20 things that pops up and you're going to get different answers. Read one doctor's opinion, this doctor's opinion, and you're just more confused than anything. Be one of those, Google MDs. And so, I mean, at some point, we're kind of all going to have to agree. We're going to have to agree on kind of what depression looks like, and how it can be the little things. Like being a little depressed, still not okay. Like you should still be able to get healing from that. And then just more, I think it's coming around, man. I really do. I think we've come a long way in the last 5 years. I think we're on a trajectory that is I'm happy with. Of course, you got the bad apples and the people that are in it for the wrong reasons. That's never going to stop. So I kind of accept that. Like we're never going to hit this like we've smashed the stigma. Right. We're always. It should be smashing the stigma, right? Because it's ongoing. But as we continue to do this, as people can see a CEO sit here and go, hey, a lot of you from the outside, if you didn't know anything of me, would go, that's real success. And I go, my success has nothing to do with my title, where I live, anything like that. Like my success is my relationships with other people. And that comes and goes. I'm still a mess. Like it's okay. When I have employees come talk to me about something they're struggling with, I don't see it as weakness. I'm drawn to it. Like I love that. It's like, let's get you some help. Let's talk about it. Take the rest of the day off. There's just going to have to be that human connection, and people stop. I don't know, maybe stop trying to fix it. Because it's not that simple. It's so unique for every single person. Stop trying to fix the problem and let's focus on helping and loving the people with the problem.
I love that. I really do. And going back one more time as to why you do what you do, because for me, honestly, in recovery, there's no better gift than when somebody I'm working with gets that 6 months that they've never been able to get before.
Yeah.
Or they get that year and they're sitting in that meeting and they're getting that 1 year chip. Their family's there. It's like the relationships are beginning to repair. They're finally starting to see somebody be productive in their life, right? Making good of their life. I can imagine that you've experienced some of the same things here. Being part of a treatment center where you see people at their lowest, and then you're able to see them kind of on that trajectory to finding that path to having a life that they never thought truly existed.
Yeah. So one of the coolest things we do is every resident gets a commencement, a graduation. I like for people to be able to graduate from stuff because I missed out on a few. so let's graduate. And it's the coolest thing ever to hear. All the staff that can make it and all the residents just going around the room and talk about the journey that we've witnessed with that person. And other staff are talking about how much they've meant to them. There's a lot of crying, and not to see that person be able to accept it, to be able to accept love and good things being said about them is the coolest part about it. And in those moments, no one's sitting there thinking, this is such a beautiful thing, but I don't agree with him politically. This is such a good for him, but he said something the other day that really annoyed me, and I'm going to hang on to that. All that other crap that we do with one another in those moments is completely invisible because it's irrelevant. It's like this person right here has put in the work, has put in the time, is already given back. And that's usually what I tell them. I go, look at what just happened here. The people that are the most successful here leave, they give us so much more than we give them. What you give this place and our residents and others, because y'all can help each other in ways that we can't. That's why group therapy and us having a smaller census works. They help each other more than we can. And what's a negative thing to say about that? Nothing. But again, that's humans coming together through their struggles and their pain, helping other people, even when it's just being honest and sharing their stories so that someone else can go, holy crap, I'm not the only one. That happened to me too. That was so brave. That guy just said that.
Why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because it's the only thing I'm good at. I suck at being anything that I feel like you want me to be, my wife wants me to be, my vision of what I think they want me to be. Once I just figured out, you know what, I like who I am when I'm in recovery, and I'm not perfect, and I'm okay with that too. I want people to feel comfortable in their own skin, not be perfect, not get all fixed, just walk through the world going, I like who I was today, and if other people don't, who cares? What they think of me is none of my business. So I do what I do because I'm good at what I do from the standpoint of it's the only thing I know how to do right. Everything else I screw up. I know how to be in recovery. I know how to not take a drink for the last 10 years. And it's by doing the little bitty things that keep me sober and happy. I'm happy. I like being happy.
And I love that saying, what other people think of me is none of my business.
None of my business.
Because it's the truth.
You want to go have a bad day and not like me? Get after it. I'm going to go drink some coffee and carry on.
This episode of Escaping Rock Bottom is sponsored by Sabino Recovery. As an ambassador of Sabino Recovery, I have seen firsthand how they transform lives in a compassionate and loving environment. Sabino Recovery is a residential treatment program that addresses trauma, substance use, mental health, and maladaptive coping mechanisms. They offer one-on-one counseling, EMDR therapy, equine therapy, yoga, and so much more. If you would like to learn more about Sabino Recovery, please visit sabinorecovery.com or contact the number provided in the description of this podcast.